This class is concerned with vertical and horizontal integration. It comes under the heading of growth strategies. Now let's start by looking at the idea of horizontal integration. Well, firstly, when companies at the same level of production or selling merge, they become horizontally integrated. So companies at the same level of production. In other words, if the companies are in the manufacturing business, they're manufacturing a particular component or related components, they may merge and that way become horizontally integrated. The idea of integration is measured against the consumer. If the integration moves towards the consumer, it's vertical. If it moves away from the consumer, it's vertical. But if it's at the same level, it's horizontal. So companies manufacturing, for example, components for a product may merge, that's horizontal. Shops selling the product or similar products may merge, that is horizontal integration. When a company merges with another company who produces similar products or services, we say that's horizontal integration. So it's at the same level and they're producing similar products and they merge. The easiest way to see this is in an example, say from retailing, say fashion clothing. Here we have 3 shops, and if the 3 shops combine, they are horizontally integrated. Now, what are the benefits of horizontal integration? Well, first of all, there are economies of scale. They're selling more of the product. They're able to negotiate better discounts from the wholesaler or from the manufacturer. They're able to get sources of finance more easily. They're able to have better training schemes for the staff. So there are many economies of scale that flow from horizontal integration. And there are also economies of scope. Sharing resources, for example, sharing transport. Perhaps it would be idle some of the time, but when there are 3 shops, let's say, involved, the transport could be more effectively used. So there are economies of scope, economies of sharing the resources and the activities. There is also the possibility of increased dominance in the market by acquiring the other businesses. Greater dominance in the market, greater visibility, customers see the business, understand it to be a large and successful business and a growing business, and customers like that. They tend to relate to that sort of business and the business prospers as a consequence. There's also cost reduction through the elimination of duplicated services or underused production capacity. For example, if a number of businesses, say engaging in manufacture, were to horizontally integrate, then any slack on the usage of machines, for example, may be taken up by other parts of the business, other parts of the new business, of the integrated business. So there is the possibility of cost reduction, better sharing of premises and better sharing of transport, as I said earlier. So these are some of the benefits of horizontal integration. As you can imagine, there are problems. There are maybe legal issues, such as antitrust, which may cause problems with this type of integration. The government likes to see competition. Competition is what the economic system is based on. And when companies merge, there is less competition. That means the consumer may have to pay a higher price because there are fewer outlets. The consumer is faced with a take it or leave it decision. which in the case of necessary goods like food and some items of clothing and so on, that could be quite serious. So the government tries to promote competition. So there may be a legal issue involved in integration. The process itself will require careful planning, and these may include financial planning, making sure that the resources are there to ensure a smooth integration, making sure that the businesses are integrated, allowing for their financial resources. In other words, that the integrating firm, the dominant firm who's leading the integration, perhaps doesn't overpay for a weak firm somewhere in the system. There are also logistical issues. For example, coordinating distribution and coordinating transport and the delivery of the product and the receipts of the product and warehousing. So there are issues which need to be addressed. It's not just a question of integrating, but perhaps new resources, new warehousing will be required for the bigger organization, which may require a new warehousing system. There are also personnel issues. The people working for the businesses may not want to be bought up by a competitor. They may disapprove of this process of integration. Or the personnel may have to be reallocated or retrained, and it may cause issues for the personnel, for the workers. So there are problems involved in horizontal integration. Now let's turn our minds to vertical integration. Vertical integration refers to the acquisition of a company which supplies the product at different levels. Vertical integration refers to the acquisition of a company, let's see, which supplies the product at a different level. So if a company is manufacturing the product and it buys the outlets that sell to the customer, that is vertical integration. It's moving levels. And that's what we mean by vertical integration. It moves from, let's say, from raw materials to manufacturing. That's vertical. From manufacturing to selling, that's vertical. In the case of horizontal, it was 3 shops, let's say. That was our example, where the 3 shops are at the same level. Each of the 3 of them are selling to the public. So it's horizontal. Vertical, we're moving levels. The degree to which a company owns its upstream suppliers and its downstream buyers is a measure of how vertically integrated it is. Now we've got new terms here. Upstream suppliers and downstream buyers. Well, as we move towards the buyer, we're moving downstream, and moving towards the suppliers of the raw materials or the suppliers of the goods is moving upstream. And I'll give you a little definition of this in a second, and we'll talk about it again in a second. Vertically integrated companies are linked through a hierarchy and share a common owner. So vertically integrated companies are linked through the hierarchy. You may see it as a business which is in a sense doing everything. It's gathering the raw materials, it's manufacturing, and it's selling. So vertically integrated company would be a large company. So there'd be many parts to the hierarchy, looking at each of the sections of the business, each of the divisions of the business, let's say. And it would have a common ownership. One person or one group of people would own it. The shareholders, perhaps for the for the holding company. Pictorially, it looks something like that. We have manufacture going to the shop. That's vertical integration. Of course, it could be the shop buying the manufacturing or setting up its own manufacturing plant. That also is vertical integration. We're just jumping levels here. We've got two levels, manufacturing to shop, or indeed shop to manufacture. Now, I mentioned earlier this idea of upstream and downstream. Downstream is when we're moving from manufacturing towards the customer. And upstream is when we're moving from the customer, or moving away from the customer, I should say, towards manufacturing. So we have two definitions there. And I'll mention it again shortly. The process of vertical integration. Well, the process of vertical integration moved the product from the raw material stage to the final product. That's what the whole system is doing. It's converting raw materials into a final product, and it's going through various levels to do it. Gathering the raw materials, manufacturing the raw materials, and then selling the raw materials to the final customer, supplying the product to the customer. And there are expressions, as I mentioned earlier to you, in vertical integration. We have, for example, expansion downstream. Downstream, moving towards the customer, is forward integration. If we're moving towards the customer, expansion downstream is forward integration. We're moving towards the customer. Downstream, towards the customer, forward. Expansion upstream refers to backward integration. We're moving away from the customer. And it's wise to become familiar with those terms. Now, issues to consider in vertical integration. There are two issues to consider when deciding whether to vertically integrate. First is the cost of market transactions between companies involved. If they are vertically integrated, would there be a cost saving? And that's a crucial question. It's not just a decision of moving from raw materials to manufacture to retailing, and it sounds like it's vertically integrated and therefore it's a desirable business practice. In fact, it may be that that's more expensive than keeping independent suppliers at each level. It really depends on the business. It depends on the conditions the business is operating in, but it's not a given that vertical integration will be cheaper. So that has to be worked out. And there are other important issues to consider, such as communications between the rival levels, or the various levels, I should say, not rivals, the various levels. In a large vertically integrated business, there may be a communication problem between let's say, the retailing section and the manufacturing section. Perhaps the manufacturing section are not producing the items as required by the customer or required specifically by the customer. And communications may become an issue. It's an issue really for management to resolve, setting up some sort of system of meetings or of communication channels that work effectively throughout the organization. But in large organizations, particularly ones cutting across different levels, the chances are there are communications problems to be addressed. And we have also the problem of production and marketing coordination. The two departments must work closely together. The production people need to know what the marketing people are up to, and any surge in demand, if it's anticipated, should be factored into the production schedules and hopefully met smoothly. Oops, sorry, I've jumped forward. Also, we've got cultural and control issues. It's difficult to control a large organization, a large vertically integrated organization. And even though it is vertically integrated, management will probably see it as different divisions, if you like, different strategic business units, each one operating almost independently, but relying on information flowing throughout the system to keep it pulling towards the corporate objective, whatever that is. So the strategy is to position the business in a certain place at a certain point of time. That strategy communicated to the vertically integrated business means that all of the strategic business units or all of the divisions within that will at least know where they're going. But as I said earlier, communications is an eternal problem with this type of structure. Now, the advantages of vertical integration. Well, production and transportation costs may be reduced by relocation. So if all the businesses come together in one plant, for example, if the manufacturing and warehousing and distribution and all of those come together in a single factory, then of course transportation costs would be reduced. That's a possibility. There certainly is greater understanding of the supply chain, and there's more certainty about the supply chain. The raw materials will flow to manufacturing. Manufacturing will know what raw materials there are. It'll be a function of that section, of that part of the integrated business to make sure there are raw materials, that there is a supply, a continuous supply of raw material. The manufacturing will be able to produce according to schedules given to it by the marketing section, and the retailing will know exactly what is in supply. So there is more certainty about the supply chain in a vertically integrated business. Previous, or if you like, prior to integration, profit margins will be available. So it is possible to look at previous profit margins and do a comparison of those vis-a-vis the new vertically integrated business. And if the calculations were right, the incentive to vertically integrate was to increase, let's say, greater return on assets, increase profitability, and then of course a comparison of profit margins before and after may be done. And if there is a discrepancy, that may be accounted for, may be explained. Vertically integrated businesses also constitute a high entry barrier for potential competitors. Competitors will find it difficult to get into the market if a large company is vertically integrated, if it has control over raw materials. That would be a barrier to entry. Potential competitors can't get their hands on the raw materials. Or it could be simply by integrating the raw materials section with the manufacturing, there are large cost savings. That's a possibility. Again, if there are large cost savings, that's a barrier to entry. So there are many possible barriers to entry that we can imagine in the case of the large vertically integrated business. And it's also, of course, the case that each of the business units that were integrated will have their own core competencies, and the workers there will have expertise in performing certain functions. Now, those core competencies would be available to the whole integrated business. And that experience, that knowledge, and that skill may prove valuable for the development of new products, for research and development, or simply retraining and continuing the business. So there's a wealth of new skill available once the business is vertically integrated. The disadvantages of vertical integration, well, cost control needs constant monitoring to replace supplier competition. You see, costs were in a sense monitored previously, before the integration, out of a sense of necessity, because suppliers and competition of other producers were putting constant pressure on the business. The other producers were selling in the marketplace, so that the business had to watch the price and watch its cost. The suppliers were putting pressure on the business by increasing the price of their raw materials or of their components. But of course, once the business is integrated and now the suppliers and the competitors are part of the same business, the need for monitoring almost disappears. But that means the price in the market will rise and the customer will be worse off. And that's precisely why the government does not particularly like the process of vertical integration. The government likes competition to keep the price down for the consumers. Management of the old and newly acquired core competencies will need careful attention. By that I mean they need to be fostered, they need to be cared for. Personnel who have developed core competencies, particular skills and talents in performing certain functions for the business before it was integrated, they may be loyal to that business, and they may not be happy about being a part of a much bigger organization. They could relate perhaps to the smaller organization, the one that was acquired and integrated. So they could relate to that, they were happy with it, they liked going to work, there was a nice environment, it was friendly, it was small. Now it's much bigger, they may not be as happy, but they are the ones who possess the core competencies, so they have to be dealt with very, very carefully. Otherwise they may leave and the business will be worse off. Of course, the large integrated business will want to streamline its production. It will want to cut down the number of products and try to gain more economies of scale out of production, high volume production of fewer products. That means there will be fewer products in the marketplace and the customer will be worse off as a consequence. Customers like a wide variety of products. We like choice. So the vertically integration process is a process that reduces choice in the market. So it may be good for preserving jobs and preserving the business, but it may be bad at supplying customer choice. So those are some ideas about the process of integration, the horizontal process of integration and the vertical process of integration. And that's all I'm going to deal with at this time on this topic. So let's leave it at that for the moment and say thank you for watching.